This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
This is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Podcast. I am your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, back once again with my co-host, Brian Solomon. How are you, Brian?
I'm okay here in week 80,007 of self-quarantine.
Yeah, it's starting to just get boring. That's the thing. I mean, I'm not freaking out. I'm not panicked. But it's like you organize every last drawer, every last closet, you check off everything on the to-do list, and you're like, oh, I'm just starting to get bored.
Yeah, I'm also at the point now where our friends and us were, constantly trying to touch base on Skype or Zoom or Google Chat. And I think now we're sort of at the point where we're just sick of the whole damn thing. And no one's even talking to each other anymore.
Yeah. And it's just starting to be about eating and watching TV and getting fat.
Oh, God, yes. I know. We bought a scale, which I probably shouldn't have done, because I'm trying to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm so paranoid because I was actually getting in some pretty decent shape before the world ended, and I don't want all of that hard work to be for nothing. So,
and it's kind of counterintuitive because in some respects you'd think people have all the time in the world now to work out or what have you, go for a run, but there is something about just state of affairs that I don't know. It just has me feeling kind of lethargic and lazy. I don't know. So
yeah, I know. I have a voice in my head that keeps pushing me. I'm hoping that it doesn't die, but it keeps pushing me.
Anyhow, plenty to talk about in the pro wrestling world. We're going to be talking some COVID-19 updates here in a bit. Some news on Money in the Bank. A little, I don't know how newsworthy it is, but a little item that dropped literally minutes before we jumped on the phone here that we'll touch on about. And again, very much caution folks about putting too much into it, but some rumors have popped up again about a potential WWE sale. So we'll touch on that. And then later on, speaking more about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on wrestling is Ring of Honor CEO. Is that his title or COO? Ring of Honor boss. Joe Koff, who we've had on the podcast a number of times, talks all things COVID-19 and Ring of Honor's approach to handling it, which is quite a bit different than I think a lot of the other major promotions, at least in the United States. Ring of Honor, I think right now, is the only major American promotion that is yet to go forth with these empty arena shows, and Joe talks a bit about why that is, whether that will change, and just kind of generally what the plan is going forward. And I think his and Ring of Honor's is very much a different outlook than some of the other promoters, and we've talked here a lot, Brian, about how it seems to be that some promoters' top priority is, they say, entertaining fans and maybe not necessarily protecting their own talent. And it would seem that Joe Koff and the Ring of Honor folks very much feel differently. The other part of it is they have very different business models. So I guess you got to take that for what it's worth also. But a fun catch up with Joe, as always. So stay tuned for that. Also want to tell you about the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated coming soon, if it hasn't already dropped. This Thursday, April 30, you'll be able to pick up the digital copy. It is the August 2020 issue featuring WrestleMania's real winners and losers. On the cover, new WWE champion Drew McIntyre. Brian, you put this together. This is pretty neat. Cover story of WrestleMania win. This is a feature we've been doing for, it's got to be close to 30 years now, right?
Yeah, well, not you and I, but
no. But we're both doing something we're not used to since Dan Murphy left. Yeah, I'm still working on the PWI poll.
Right. I was in high school 30 years ago, so I was reading the WrestleMania winners and losers article, which is actually what's so cool about it. It was the same feeling that I had when I started working at WWE Magazine, which was I used to read this when I was a kid and look forward to it and grab it at the newsstand and all that. And now I'm writing it. So, it's surreal and it's fun.
Yeah. And there's tons, this WrestleMania being so unusual. It seems like it was really ripe for this kind of analysis of real winners and losers. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading that. Also in this issue, features on Marty Scurll, a hot seat interview that I conducted with AEW Women's Champion Nyla Rose, another feature on Jacob Fatu from Major League Wrestling, and another feature I put together about NXT's North American champion, Keith Lee. So loaded with lots of fun content, as always, the August issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. If you want to get it before anyone else, go to PWI-online.com, Pro Wrestling Illustrated's webpage, and you can pick up the one issue, have it delivered to your home. You could download it right away and be checking it out within minutes. But really the way to go is to subscribe, and the longer you subscribe for, the deeper the savings. You can save more than half off the cover price. It's absolutely the way to go. And, beyond just PDFs of every page in the magazine, it's customized for your mobile device, your computer, what have you. A lot of fun interactive features that you won't get, obviously, in the print issue. But if you want the print issue, and we certainly understand that, I mean, not having a whole lot to do in the last couple of weeks, one of the things I've been doing is digging through all my old magazines, and there's nothing like, holding one in your hand and flipping through it. So we're all about that as well. You can subscribe to the print edition at PWI-online.com. And now 41 years and still going strong. We appreciate your support. And you can continue to support us by following us on social media at official PWI on Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook. We're also on YouTube now. You can find us there now. We've been uploading the podcast, which is something I want to do for a long time. So glad we have another outlet now to get people to listen to the podcast. Another fun thing I just found out, I always plug the Pro Wrestling Illustrated T-shirts available at Pro Wrestling Tees, where we've got some new shirts. We've got the Wrestler magazine shirt and Inside Wrestling, two of our other titles from some years back. They had iconic logos in their own right, and beyond that, just look really cool on a shirt. So now you've got more options for your T-shirt magazine, wrestling magazine T-shirts. And again, go to ProWrestlingTees.com for that. What else do we want to plug? You could get the magazine, I believe, on Amazon, actually, these days, a digital magazine. So you could do that. The podcast, of course, wherever you get your podcast, please subscribe and give us a positive review. And you can do that over at Podbean, which have been hosting us for a number of years. And what else? You could reach us by email at pwi@capitalpublishing.com, or if it's specifically about the podcast, PWI Podcast at outlook.com. I think that's about it. Anything you wanted to drop in there? How's the book coming along, Brian?
Well, I'm in the middle of transcribing lots and lots of interviews. It just seems to never end. But it's interesting because sometimes when you're interviewing these folks, you try to listen as much as you can, but you're so worried about recording and getting everything right. And then when you go back into it and you get some real gems that you didn't really maybe notice the first time. I was listening to an interview I did with Flying Fred Curry, who was one of the top wrestlers for the Sheik, because as you know, the book I'm working on is the biography of the Sheik, Blood and Fire. And he was giving just this amazing insight on getting to know the Sheik and his wife Joyce, and what their marriage was like, what their mansion was like, and just how their business was run. He's a real gem of a guy. He lives here in Connecticut near me, and I think he's got to be close to 90 at this point, but he's a treasure trove of info. So I've been digging through stuff like that right now. I'm honestly dying to start the writing process, but I think I'm still probably about a month away from that.
Have you tried these transcription programs? They seem to have come a long way. I would almost never use them before, and then somebody turned me on to one that I guess is better than most. And actually, this Nyla Rose interview in the latest issue, I did that way. And you've got to go back and clean it up some, but it does save you a whole lot of work. I think it's called otter.io.
Well, I have one that I tried using. I don't want to mention the name because I had like a love-hate relationship with
no plugs.
it. So I don't want them to come after us. But, I started out thinking, okay, this is a great time saver. I'd never used it before. But what I discovered was happening was the cleanup process was so involved that it wasn't even worth it. It was taking as much time as it would have taken me, because I don't transcribe every word when I do it myself manually. I just look for the most like salient kind of bits and the most quote-worthy stuff and information. And this thing was, it's transcribing every single word. There's so much wrestling terminology and names of wrestlers that it's not recognizing. And there's so much cleanup that there were times when I couldn't even make sense of it, and I had to go back into the recording. So, it was pretty cool for a while. I did like 4 or 5 of them that way, and now I'm just thinking I'm just going back to doing it manually because it actually saves time, believe it or not.
Yeah, the whole wrestling terminology thing is a complication. I remember, it reminds me of years ago, I interviewed a deaf pro wrestler from the Buffalo area. His name was the Silent Warrior. I'm still Facebook friends with him for a column I did, I think, for the Wrestler magazine. And interviewing him required using this service where it's like a relay service where he is communicating with a sign language interpreter, and then I'm on the phone speaking to the interpreter, right? So I ask a question to her, she signs it to him, he signs his answer back to her, she reads it to me. And I remember him saying, we were just talking about wrestling, and I remember her struggling through the term power bomb. She's like, well, I like to use a power bomb. Just thought it was amusing. Yeah, so we forget that we have our own little language here.
Well, like the one I just went through, which was Fred Curry, he's a very elderly man and his voice is kind of frail, and so the software couldn't even pick up what he was saying at all. I was forced to do it manually because it was missing every other word that he said. So, it's good in theory, but for my own needs, I found like it was actually making more work for me. So I sort of lost patience with it.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to reading that book when it comes out for sure. So let's talk some current events. Again, as I mentioned, literally just a minute or two before we get on the phone, I get a text from my brother saying, what's this about WWE being sold to Fox or ESPN? And just did a quick Google search beforehand. So I don't know if this is anything. I don't know if by the time this podcast drops, it's a huge story, or it's just turned out to be nothing, but it's worth at least touching on. And this is something that's been out there now for a number of months, just in terms of whispers and buzzing and that kind of thing. I don't know how serious it is. It was actually Dutch Mantel who I guess tweeted about it, saying that he heard this essentially firsthand from somebody who was in the know of a potential sale, either to Fox or ESPN, that could be finalized by mid-May. I'm certainly dubious. Could there be something to it? Absolutely. I can't imagine that it is that far along. Certainly in this climate, that kind of deal would be made imminently. But what about Brian? Is it something that makes sense to you as a real possibility, whether right now or in the next year or in the next 2 years?
I think it's inevitable. I've been saying this for years, and I said it even when I was working there, and most people within the company were kind of incredulous because they never imagined that the McMahons would ever give it up. And the way I look at it is I think that was true of Vince. I really do. I don't think that's true of Hunter and Stephanie. I think the feeling I get is they'd be very open at the right price, the right circumstance. They'd still want, obviously, some form of control and running it and that kind of thing. I think they absolutely would be open to it. And in the media environment we have today, this is how it goes. God, if somebody could buy Star Wars, okay, somebody could buy WWE. It's what's happening right now, this kind of media consolidation. WWE is a pop culture media brand and powerhouse. I just think it's a matter of time. I think Fox is a very likely possibility. ESPN, which is Disney, I could definitely see Disney kind of stepping in and swooping snatching them up. I don't know if these stories pop up every year or so. So I don't know if it's going to happen right now. It could just be a total rumor blown out of proportion. But I do think it is going to happen within the next few years. I think it's inevitable. Yeah.
And again, not knowing who would be buying it, what the terms would be, but is there the potential when you hear about something like that? Does it sound like it would be good news for fans, for the industry? And it cuts both ways, right? I mean, being under the umbrella of one of these major corporations where I think there's probably more accountability than WWE is used to right now. And we've certainly seen a lot of that play out in the last couple of months during this whole pandemic and we've talked about it here about them sort of going rogue and doing what they want to do. I don't know if that happens if you're under a Fox umbrella or a Disney umbrella. We saw Disney essentially pull the plug on a UFC show a couple of weeks back because some of the PR, some of the headline to the articles got to be too much. That's the part that I wonder how willing the McMahons would be willing to sort of to cede that accountability, that responsibility.
Yeah, I don't think, while I do think it's inevitable, I don't think it's going to be good for the product, honestly. I think, all you got to do is look at what happened with WCW. They were owned by a multimedia giant, and all we heard were horror stories about, mismanagement and kind of clueless executives, people not really understanding what fans wanted or what was best for the business and all this sort of thing. I can't help but think that something very similar would happen. It's hit and miss when these things happen. Like Marvel is an example. Okay, so Disney bought Marvel, and they've turned it into a much more profitable kind of powerhouse than it ever was before. But then you look at kind of what they did with Star Wars, and I'll get Star Wars fans that are going to come at me now. But I think most people would agree that they've kind of bungled Star Wars, and now they're at the point where they're talking about just kind of like putting it into hibernation for a while. So, it's hit and miss. And I think like with WWE, my gut is it would be great for the McMahon family. It would be great in the short term from a business point of view, but I think the product would suffer. I don't think that fans would be happy with whatever changes and things would happen. I just don't think it would be a good thing. I think it would be like early 90s WCW all over again, basically.
But they'd have a level of reach that they don't have right now. Imagine, and I guess it depends who it is. If it was Disney, I think it would be stronger than Fox. The Fox thing is sort of interesting because it'd be surprising. The feeling I think among a lot of folks who have been watching is that WWE's been underperforming on Fox, and so there's a thought that Fox would be disappointed in the ratings and the viewership that SmackDown's been doing. And granted, everything is so wacky now with the pandemic that I don't know right now is the best time to judge. But even in the months leading up to it, they weren't exactly setting the world on fire on Friday nights on Fox. So what's the interest there? I don't know. Is it just more content, original live content?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think the interest might be preserving or protecting their investment. It might be a situation, this is pure speculation, of just like, okay, look, we put a lot of money into this damn thing, and if you guys don't know how to run it, then we're just going to take it over and run it and make sure that we get out of it what we want to get out of it. It could be that.
Right. We'll see. Again, I don't know how much weight to put in it. Certainly something worth watching. Let's see how good Dutch Mantel's Dirty Dutch's sources are. So something I want to talk to you a little lighter, a little more fun. Neither of us were crazy, to say the least, about WWE's earliest attempts to think outside the box in this whole pandemic in how they can present matches and talking about the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse match, neither of which I think either of us was crazy about. And so it seems like the latest incarnation is going to be their take on the Money in the Bank match this year. And this news, I believe, dropped last week. And basically, I think details are still being figured out. But the idea is that the match, I don't know if it'll be for both the men's and the women's Money in the Bank matches. I imagine it will take place at Titan Tower in Stamford, Connecticut, your old workplace, and begins on the ground floor. And the idea is that they will they will wrestle all the way up to the roof of the building, where the briefcase will be. I don't know if it's on top of a ladder on top of the building. I guess it would be. So I gotta say this, and I think folks might be surprised to hear me say this. As soon as I heard it, I loved it. I love this idea. I think it's a hoot. I think it is creative in a real good way. And granted, I haven't seen it play out. I don't know how it'll be shot. But I think it is the kind of outside of the box thinking that is fun. I don't have a huge problem with it. It is a creative use of the resources they have, not being able to play in arenas. So what do we have? Where can we shoot stuff? Well, we can shoot stuff in our own headquarters. And I'm just and I think part of it is the mystique of Titan Tower, which most fans haven't seen very much of. So I think it'll be kind of fun to have a match in WWE's corporate headquarters. Curious on your take, because again, you worked there for a number of years. So both the logistics of doing something like this and just generally your thoughts on it.
Right. So I have a very specific interest in it, like you said, because, I'm curious to see what it looks like in there now. It's been 13 years from what I understand from people I know that are still there. Like, it's almost unrecognizable. There's been so much renovation done and everything. I'm cautiously optimistic. My one fear is that it turns into like Orton Edge 2, where it's just this kind of really kind of protracted, like very kind of phony looking, like what props can we use kind of a match. But like I said, I'm trying to be hopeful because it's never been done before. So it could be really interesting. It's an interesting idea on paper. I'll just put it that way. I hope that they can kind of pull it off. So, like most office buildings, for those that don't know, it's a 4-story office building. So they'd presumably be starting on the ground floor and then making their way up, second, third, fourth floor, which is where all the, Vince's office and everything is. So that could be fun. And then they go up to the roof. Now there is the roof at Titan Tower is like a
cafeteria or something.
Yeah,
right?
They call it Titan Terrace. It's almost like it doesn't have. Yeah, it is. It's used for outdoor dining. Like I used to go up there and have lunch all the time in nice weather. It's got like little kind of shrubberies and things up there. There's a barbecue. It's set up for people to eat up there and kind of hang out in good weather. And actually, I think one of the old openings of Monday Night Raw, like back in the 90s, I think they shot some stuff up there where they had a ring set up, if anybody remembers, and there was like a bunch of fans up there and everything. That was shot up there.
They had the helicopters, I think, flying over. They shot something from a helicopter, yeah.
And I think there have been over the years some commercials and things shot inside the building. Like I think I seem to remember the Ultimate Warrior commercial for their video game commercial or something like that when he was being included was there. Now and then you get a glimpse of it. But like you said, most fans hardly ever have seen it. I'd be curious to see how they do it. Are they going to be like fighting in the elevators? There's 2 sets of elevators. And then there's stairs that go around both sides of the building, like a typical kind of office building of that size. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for crazy stuff, I'm sure. I guarantee you they're going to wind up in Vince's office suite. There is no doubt in my mind that they'll definitely do that. They'll probably be in the cafeteria, which is, if memory serves me, I think it's on the 2nd floor. Yeah, it's on the 2nd floor. They'll probably go through there. And things like that. There's giant boardrooms that will be fun for them to fight in and things like that. Like where they used to shoot Bite This in WWE.com's Bite This in a kind of like a glass enclosure that we used to call the Goldfish, the Goldfish Bowl. And so there's a lot of spots like that would make for interesting bits in the match, I'm sure. So, I'm going to be watching it. I'm curious as hell to see like how they're going to do it, how they're going to play it out. Like you said, is the ladder going to be on the roof or is it just going to be a briefcase on the roof? I don't know. Are they going to have to climb the flagpole? Who knows? I guess we'll see.
And the backdrop of this is that I guess they're moving, right? I mean, I know that's been in the works for a while, and in their announcement of all the releases recently related to COVID-19 and their cost cutting, and one of the things they touched on was, I guess, delaying or postponing their move of the headquarters. So I don't know if that affects things at all. Does that mean that they feel, maybe more free to do some damage if they're not sticking around, or what have you? But yeah, I do think that building is so fascinating because, you have like this corporate monolith, WWE, and it's always been thought of as New York, right? You go to WWE, you're working in New York, but it is so far removed from that. This little area in Stamford, Connecticut, it is this big. It's touched on a 4-story corporate building, but it really is kind of in the middle of nowhere. I think there was like a beer distributor across the street. It's not like there's a lot of buildings around there, and literally you walk around the block, and there are kids playing basketball in their driveways. It's just this little suburban town with this big skyrise with the WWE logo above it. It's so kind of out of place, and maybe that's why they, over the years, haven't done that much with it on TV, because, they did do the thing. The
Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well, they just did an angle last year where it was when Drake Maverick got married and they honeymooned, right? And I think that's where they visited Titan Tower. But really, it's kind of this mysterious place that most fans don't know anything about.
Well, there's also the famous thing they did on Raw where Austin temporarily took over the company, and he went into the tower and he was in the board meetings and he was, running roughshod in the building. But yeah, you're right. It's on the outskirts of downtown Stamford. So downtown Stamford's actually pretty busy. It's very urban, a lot of skyscrapers and things. But Titan Tower is like one highway exit north of that. So it's pretty residential. And of course, yes, shout out to the beverage barn across the street from Titan Tower, where many an after work beverage was purchased. It is a quiet, weird kind of area for a building like that to be. Well, the first time I went there for my first interview, I almost was kind of thrown off by that. I couldn't get over the fact. You're right. Like there is literally like a residential house that is directly adjacent to Titan Tower on either side. It's completely on a residential block.
Yeah, really, really strange. And we have seen more of it on WWE Network, a lot of documentaries. Basically anytime there's some kind of documentary where a wrestler is visiting WWE corporate headquarters, we get to see some of it from the inside, and it looks fantastic. I mean, the first time, it would have been like the early 90s. I guess the building was relatively new at the time, and I remember driving by it, and I was a huge fan back then, and just happened to be, I guess, on the 95, and like, oh my God, we have to pull over. And I remember going in there and just sort of being, wide-eyed, and the receptionist just giving me some 8x10s, which was really neat. And I think they had like action figures at the reception desk, so that was really neat. But over the years, I mean, clearly they pumped a lot of money into the place. So, and any sadness on your part of talk of moving out of there?
Yeah, I mean, they've been there such a long time. I think 91, if memory serves, is when they bought that building and took that over. They were in downtown Stamford before that, but in a much smaller space. So, I mean, they've been there a really long time. I mean, you mentioned the whole New York thing, and I mean, there was a time in the Vince Sr. days when their corporate headquarters were in Manhattan. I forget the name of the hotel. Might have been the Roosevelt Hotel, but they actually had corporate offices in a luxury hotel in Midtown Manhattan, like in the 70s and early 80s. But ever since the 80s, they've been in Connecticut since Vince Jr. has been in charge of it. I mean, they've been bursting at the seams at that building for a while now. I know they've been using facilities at their TV studio, which is kind of a few blocks away. They use some corporate space there. They've rented out corporate space across the street from Titan Tower, which they've been using for years. So there's been a lot of spillover. I can totally understand they're obviously running out of space. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of the end of an era. They've been in that building for almost 30 years now, if they really are going to move. Yeah, I mean, it's an iconic place for wrestling fans. It's sort of like this weird, it's like Mecca. It's like Disney World, except you can't actually go inside, you know?
And I do think one thing that's coming out of this whole pandemic that's sort of interesting and fun to watch is this creativity about how we could use spaces that we have access to. And, you saw what they did with WrestleMania at the Performance Center, and under the circumstances, how they were able to transform that place into something that looked okay on TV. This seems to be the evolution of that, actually going into the corporate headquarters. Is there anywhere else? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you know this better than I would, but some people seem to think that the Firefly Funhouse match might have been shot at least in part in the warehouse where they have all the old props and equipment. Like, do you know what this place is and where it is and what it's like? And could that be?
You don't want to get me started on that, because that was that project. I can tell you, when I worked there, we heard buzz about this place, this mysterious warehouse in Connecticut, and I made it my mission to figure out where it was and to do.
So it was a secret?
To get permission to do. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't common knowledge even among employees, and not many people knew where it was, but we knew about it. And it's north of Fairfield County, for those that know Connecticut. I think it's somewhere, and I'm not going to totally blow up the spot here, but I think it's somewhere in the Newtown area, if memory serves me correctly, which is further north and kind of closer to the New York State border. And once we found out, we actually got permission. I wound up kind of bugging enough people over the years that after a few years of working there, they finally gave me permission to do a magazine story on it, and I did. And it's in WWE Magazine. I want to say somewhere in 2006, we finally went. Me and another writer, Matt Christensen.
I remember that.
Yeah. We went there, and we had the time of our lives in there. I strapped myself to the Undertaker cross that Steve Austin was strapped to, and took pictures of myself. I sat in Triple H's throne and his WrestleMania throne. I have pictures in that. We found like banners and, things from like every WrestleMania just randomly hanging around everywhere. Just incredible stuff. Like the old blue cage is in there, and just all kinds of random props. Anything you could think of, it's there. And it's this completely nondescript warehouse. There's no markings. There's no sign. You wouldn't even know it if you drove by. You'd have no idea that there was anything there, but it's there.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if they shot some of that there. You're right, because there's so much old props there that they would have just been able to draw from and use, at their fingertips.
And I've thought some of that right now could come in handy. I mean, something that I've always, I don't know if they have this stuff or not, but do they have like the old Nitro set or something? I mean, can you do that? Can just fun ways of just kind of changing things up. Something they did for years that was a lot of fun was the old school Raw, where they would put up the old ring with the red, white, and blue ropes and the blue apron and the big Raw letters. I imagine that stuff's all in that warehouse, and maybe it's a good time to do something like that, because it wouldn't look all that different than it did back then. Kind of the small, dimly lit arenas. So I don't know. Maybe there's an opportunity there to kind of have some fun with the circumstances they've been dealt. And is there much space inside that warehouse to do much, or is it? Where I think they put out a DVD some years back. I think Sean Mooney hosted it, where it was these never before seen matches. A really fun DVD, and it was Sean Mooney and what's her name, Charlie, walking through that warehouse. That's the one place I think I remember seeing it. It looks pretty cluttered, so I don't know how much you could do in there.
Yeah, I don't want to take credit, but I will say that after we did that story in 2006, they started kind of opening it up more, and it became more of this regular feature in the magazine, and they started sharing glimpses of it and things like that. But I was there, like I said, I mean, it's been 14 years since I was there, and I'm sure they've been filling it with more stuff. But when I was there, it was pretty cavernous. Like, there was a lot of room to walk around and move. All the main stuff was kind of like up against the walls and things like that. And there was one corner which was just impenetrable with the most dense kind of stuff collected there, like heavy, hard things. Like that's where we found the Undertaker cross and things like that, just kind of in there. And like every when the cell that they would use to like suspend somebody above the ring and all things like that, that was all there. I think they probably even have the elimination chamber there and things like that. It might even be bigger than we saw for all I know, but there's definitely room, at least when I was there.
Yeah. We're talking about something that hasn't even been done, but
why not?
It would seem like maybe the next, why not? Yeah. I mean, it's like you got to be creative, I guess, right now. One thing, maybe sort of, last thing on this, but Triple H gave an interview, and I brought it up in my interview, which you're about to hear with Joe Koff, about some of the lessons they're learning from this whole thing maybe sticking around. And one is sort of re-examining whether, how much of wrestling should be a live event business anyway. And I guess the big picture is, do house shows stick around? Now it's going to be a long time, I think, before we even have house shows as we know them. Certainly not the big 10,000 seat, 15,000 seat shows that we're used to here in the New York area. They just postponed the Madison Square Garden show yet again. That had already been pushed back. But one of the things I think that they're looking at is that even when they could do house shows, they weren't exactly setting the world on fire with them. And Eric Bischoff talks about this a lot when he took over at WCW. One of the changes he made was, at least for a while there, was canceling house shows because they were money losers. So, and he talked about how for so long the answer at WCW was, well, if we're not making a whole lot of money on house shows, then let's run more of them so we make more money. But they're all money losers, so every time they would go out, they would just lose more and more money. And this started to be an issue in the last year or two for WWE as well. So any concerns about whether we've maybe seen the end of house show business as we know it?
I, for one, would mourn that if that happened. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of fans know, a lot of fans may know, especially older fans, that, I mean, the house show business is kind of a throwback. And it used to be the heart and the soul, the lifeblood of the business. The purpose of television was to drive people to go to the live shows where you would see the best matches, you'd see the title changes, you'd see, all the biggest stars, and the TV was just a tease, and that kind of started changing. Really, it started changing after obviously WrestleMania. But I mean, really in the 90s, once you start getting monthly pay-per-view events and things like that, house shows started becoming less and less important. It just sort of became like the old stereotype of, well, we know that no titles are going to change. We know nothing major is going to happen because it's not on television, which was a total flip. And I think that that's what hurt the house shows. I was one of the people that always used to push for, you guys should be doing important things on house shows. Make people feel like they're missing something. Do title changes on there. Even if you have a camera at ringside just to record it, like shoot major angles, like do things that make people want to go. Because, yeah, I mean, the idea became kind of stale. I think the one benefit, or the two major benefits of house shows that would be lost, is it gives people in the smaller markets who don't always get TV a chance to see live shows. That's one thing. And it also, this is, I think, the most crucial thing, is it keeps everybody on their game. It keeps the talent really polished. It keeps them trained. It keeps them really knowing what they're doing, because a lot of fans may not realize, but the majority of shows are house shows. I mean, these guys on a weekly basis, they're doing like, if you're Raw, you're doing, I think you're doing like on a non-pay-per-view week, you're doing one TV and you're doing like 3 house shows. So, I mean, most of their work is just for the live audience, and you'd be losing all that opportunity to kind of stay sharp, try out matches, try new things, try new moves, try whatever, try a gimmick out, without having it be seen by millions of people. Like, that's the benefit of house shows that would be lost if they were to make that change. So I would definitely, I think that would be a real loss.
But it can't be at a financial loss either. I mean, if every time you're going out, you're losing money, all the other benefits that you're talking about become less and less important. And you're right about those small markets, but I think those small markets are also sometimes where you get the worst crowds. I went to. I'm in the Metro New York area, so the house shows that tend to come around here are usually fairly loaded. You're talking either Madison Square Garden or Nassau Coliseum or the Prudential Center in Newark. So a big market, and you'll get the A-listers. But last summer I went to a house show in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Over by the Poconos, and I was blown away by how small the crowd was. I mean, maybe there was, I don't know, 2,000 fans there, for in a building that probably sat at least 10,000. And you're flying all these guys out there, the production people, all the talent. I gotta imagine that they took a loss on that show. And if that is kind of the norm for them, then I get where. But the flip side of that is that it's not the first time the house show business has been down, right? And the idea, I guess, shouldn't be let's just cut bait here. It should be let's improve the product so more people come out. But now we have this whole new wrinkle of density and live crowds, and maybe it's out of their hands.
I think they've done a very poor job of educating fans about house shows. That's the problem. Like, you remember, I mean, we're similar age.
The live event center,
right?
Yeah.
The event center, they'd be hyping. They'd have local promos, like you had to go. I remember being a kid and thinking, like, if I don't go to the Nassau Coliseum, what happens if Killer Khan beats Hulk Hogan for the World Championship? I'm going to miss this. Like, I really felt that, and that's gone. Like, there are many young fans. I've had this experience, I don't know if you have, where they're not even aware that WWE or wrestling in general does shows that are not on television. Like, this is a concept they're not even aware of.
Yeah.
I've also had the experience of people who are casual fans going to a house show and being like, what am I watching? What is this? Because they don't understand.
Or they think they're at Raw.
Right.
You get that a lot, saying like, oh, that's where the cameras are over there.
Right. And they're going, well, where's the production? Where's the pyro? What is this? Why is it just one match after another? And I'm like, well, it's because you're at a wrestling show. Why is it where they're waiting for like the 15-minute in-ring promos and all that stuff and the crazy angles. Yeah. And so they're not educated as to what to even expect when they go, which is you're going to get longer matches, you're going to get more in-ring action. It's a different kind of experience. It's more focused on the wrestling,
Yeah, I love house shows too. I will take a house show over going to a TV taping or even a pay-per-view any day of the week. And I've actually sort of lamented that they've injected more production value into those shows because they're not what a house show should be. So I'm not sure I'm crazy about when I go to the house show now and they've got the stage and they've got some production. I love that for, even as an adult, when I'd go to a house show at the Nassau Coliseum, it looked basically like it did when I was a kid. And now not so much. Now they have stepped up the production value, and I get why they have to do it, but it's just not a house show anymore. But yeah, I mean, I still don't understand why they don't do localized promos. They air commercials for these things. I mean, would it be that much to really drive home what the card is and have a Seth Rollins cut a promo about, how when he gets his hands on Kevin Owens at the Nassau Coliseum, that kind of thing, something. And then the other part of it is, I don't know why they haven't done enough with the WWE network with house shows. And they have here and there, we get like the Starrcade special, and they do every once in a while these other specials where they air a portion of a house show on the network live or live to tape, something like that. But I've wondered why not make it a weekly show, and an hour from whatever house show is going on that weekend. And it increases stakes. You could develop an angle there, or at least build one But yeah, it's funny because I guess it's about a year or two ago, this came up in one of these investor conference calls about the house show business declining, and Vince McMahon said something to the effect of, we know what the problem is, and we're fixing it, and absolutely nothing changed. Right. So I don't know what they think it is, but whatever they think it is, it's not it.
Yeah. I think they're kind of, like you said, if it comes down to dollars and cents, obviously you can't keep doing it if you're bleeding money. But you mentioned the whole thing of, like, I think it would be a good idea to spotlight different house show matches on the network. It kind of reminds me of what they used to do on the old primetime wrestling, which was exactly that, where we're going to take it. Right, we're going to take you to a match from the Philadelphia Spectrum, and this and there. We're going to show you what happened in Landover, Maryland, and it would just be some random match,
Yeah, some of the best matches I've ever seen have been away from TV cameras, and even in the last several years. I mean, I go back to a cage match at the Nassau Coliseum with Daniel Bryan and John Cena. This was the Christmas weekend show, Christmas before last. This was 2018, and it was supposed to be AJ and Daniel Bryan in a cage, and AJ got the flu. And so they subbed in John Cena, who wasn't even really on the road at the time, and he came out to Long Island to do this show, and they just had an amazing match, really, really fantastic, top-notch stuff. And if you weren't in the Nassau Coliseum that night, you didn't see it.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, I just want to ask you a quick thing, because I know you're a Nassau Coliseum guy. Were you at the house show that had Bret Hart versus Owen Hart in an Iron Man match?
No, I wasn't. Yeah, I've found that on it's on YouTube, I think. Yeah, but I was not there. Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I think it was like 94 or something, and they went
in the middle of the trial. Right, the trial was like going on, I think, that same time,
right,
and almost across the street. Right, the courthouse was in Uniondale.
Yes, that's right. And it was nuts. I mean, it was a pay-per-view level match. It was probably the greatest match I've ever seen live, or definitely that I've ever seen at a WWE house show. It was beyond belief. It was better than 90% of pay-per-view matches I've seen.
Yeah. And this was before the Iron Man match in '96 with Shawn and Bret. So this was really a novel concept at the time. The hour long, they called it a marathon match. At the time.
Right, marathon match. Yeah, and I think, God, if memory serves, I think it might have even been over an hour. I think they might have given them more than an hour. I don't remember maybe I'm misremembering that, but it was. I remember it was a very long show. It was like a 3.5 hour house show, which for those days especially was long.
And this would also have been the time where attendance was rock bottom, right? So do you remember what the crowd was like for that?
I remember not that specific one, but I used to go to the Garden and Nassau Coliseum constantly in 94, 95. And yeah, I mean, there were times where there was definitely like 2,000 or 3,000 people in like a 15,000 seat place. Yeah.
The upside, because I would go at the time too, the upside of that was you'd buy the cheapest ticket in the house and then move way, way, way up, and you'd be on the floor because the place was empty pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. I hope they figure again, and who knows how much of it is even going to be out of their hands. At the very least, I think it's going to be a while before we're back to house shows as we know them. But I do worry that maybe WWE looks at this right now and says, well, maybe we just don't go back to them. I hope that doesn't happen. All right, Brian, we've talked for a while here. I appreciate you chatting, and we'll do it again real soon. Right now, let's hear from Ring of Honor Chief Operating Officer Joe Koff.
We were talking about how, by and large, we've both been able to get by this whole shutdown well enough here in the Northeast. But I was asking you, I imagine there's a lot of pressure on you in having so many people dependent on Ring of Honor, from all your talent to support staff. So I imagine that's got to weigh on you.
It does weigh on me, but to tell you the truth, the decisions that we've made, and these go back to early March, we were probably one of the first promotions, major promotions, I would say, kind of stop the presses and stop the runs, so to speak. It actually happened the week of the anniversary show, which was in, I think March 13th was the date. And the week or 3 days before, even 4 days before, the world started to tumble a little bit as far as live events and social distancing and things like that. And I wasn't even able to attend the event in Las Vegas because of I was not exposed, but I was in a hotel where somebody tested positively. And at that time, Al, we were talking about the beginning of March, nobody really knew what it was, how to treat it. Everyone was kind of in somewhat of a panic mode, and the emergency room wouldn't even let me come in because I really had those symptoms and I had no reason to go in, thank goodness. But they said, don't travel and don't go into work. So my guys were already in Vegas. This is now Wednesday. The show is Friday. We're now on Wednesday starting our conversations. And I'm beginning to feel a little uneasy with what I'm sensing and what I'm seeing. And one of my concerns was getting everybody home and safe to where they wanted to be. And we have a lot of international talent from, UK, United Kingdom, and our Mexican stars, our champions. And I just needed to be sure in my mind, as a responsible person and just somebody who was in a community of human beings and empathy and compassion, that we could get these people home so they could to be in case airlines shut down, which they happen to do, and internationally anyway. So we acted pretty quickly, but the main concern has always been and will always be the people, not only our fans, because they're very, very important to me, and I wouldn't want to put anybody in any kind of compromised situation by coming to a Ring of Honor show if it wasn't a healthy environment for them to watch it. And my staff and my wrestlers and my all the people that are involved. Responsibility, but I didn't think it wasn't a hard decision to make. It was the only decision to make, and I'm glad we did it. And then subsequently, Al, we canceled, the April and May shows, and now we're still in April. It's hard to believe, time has taken on a new continuum, it seems, in this work from home environment, where days can go incredibly fast, and then you just wonder, when the day will end. This is our new norm. So, So we'll look at June next, and as states start opening up, we can start making some plans and making some thoughts. But it will always be in the best interest of the company and the people who work for the company as to how quickly we get back into ring action.
Is that to say that you objected to the response from some other promoters? Look, you're the only major American promotion that has stayed completely shut down. We at least know WWE has continued its taping, put on WrestleMania. AEW as well has kept on with the live shows, and even more recently, Impact Wrestling. We saw them earlier this week putting on the Rebellion show. All of these basically in front of empty audiences. Why haven't you taken that approach?
Well, I think it's because I don't. First of all, there's travel restrictions that, I don't want to put anyone in any uncomfortable situations, and that's just how we feel. And I stand behind that. I'm not. I have no judgments. I'm non-judgmental on what other people are doing. They make decisions based on what's good for their company, and I respect whatever decisions they make. It doesn't have to be the one I make. That's obviously not the one I make, but. I think there's a great sense of comfort for our people to know that there's someone caring in this regard, that their health, I'm putting their health and their welfare and the safety of all the people involved over the business right now. And we're very fortunate, Al. Don't forget, we have a little bit of a different model for our TV. Our distribution is basically our own stations plus international. That have been partnered with us for a long time. And we are still producing original content. It's just not matches. And so we haven't missed a beat other than the live shows and, no audience matches. And I'm not comfortable with that yet. I think there has to be more available and immediate testing for me to get into that, because the contact is so close in the sport, as it has to be, that I just think I have a greater responsibility than just doing that.
So I hadn't really thought about this. So Is that to say that your situation is a little bit different in that without that live gate revenue, those sales coming in, there really isn't a point to putting on shows because that's how you make your money. So if you're not selling tickets, again, what's the point?
Well, that's correct. I mean, that model is important to us. I don't want anyone to think that having live shows is not important. It's just a piece of our revenue streams. We have multiple revenue streams for our business model. And without fans, you lose that business, that stream. But again, even to get wrestlers and our performers and our production people to a neutral site, wherever that be, a closed set, it still involves travel. It still involves contact. And I just have to make sure people are comfortable. And they're comfortable enough, and I can staff it in a comfortable enough way that we can start producing responsibly. And we'll do that. I don't know the time, though, because every day is a new day. So right now, it's not this month. So I know that.
Is it in as much as Ring of Honor is a relatively small piece of a much larger media organization? Has there been any pushback from your higher ups at Sinclair about, why are we continuing to why are we doing things the way we're doing? Or has everybody been on the same page here about the approach to this?
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah. We are one company, and our company has taken the same philosophy and ideology to our stations, to our RSNs, to our operating companies that may not be directly broadcast related. This is what we believe, and we believe in getting through this. And believe me, we're a broadcasting company, and a lot of our revenues are advertising. We all know what's happening right now with that. But there's a greater responsibility than that little tiny piece in the scope of everything that's going on. And Sinclair, as a company that I work for, a company that owns Ring of Honor, they are just top-notch through this whole process. And I just love being part of this company for that.
Yeah. Another thing we've seen happen in all kinds of industries and in this industry in particular with WWE is the job losses. We saw a couple of weeks ago WWE announced literally dozens of layoffs, furloughs, a lot of talent that wasn't being utilized all that much, but also I think some names that would surprise fans, folks like Rusev and Gallows and Anderson. So really just a lot of bloodshedding over in WWE. Is that something that with every day, you mentioned the advertising losses, the revenue losses, ticket revenue not coming in, with every day that happens, is that something that becomes more of a possibility over at Ring of Honor, where you also have these contracts? A lot of them, I imagine, are pretty large contracts with talent. Can you continue to pay these folks essentially for sitting at home?
We've been doing it, and we are open for business. We will maintain business, and we take, like everything we have to do, Al, we take each day at a time, each month at a time. And right now, we have not laid off anybody, and everyone's paid. And, I think you might have noticed even in April, we paid all of the talent and even the independent contract production people through that period. I mean, we've been a responsible employer in this situation, and I'd like to believe that we can continue to be.
Yeah. The other part of the story that I imagine is relevant for you with all the layoffs at WWE is that becomes a whole lot more talent that is on the market. I don't know if they are immediately, even if they were, it's not like you can do anything with them today. But is that an opportunity for Ring of Honor when you see 20, 30, even beyond that, I forget what the number is, of talent, a lot of them young, a lot of them with very much an upside out there in the free market? Is that something that you imagine in some cases you'll go after?
I think that's a creative decision. I mean, these were people that weren't in Ring of Honor. There are people that have been in Ring of Honor before, and we have a past with them, and we always have a welcome mat back for ex-Ring of Honor people. We've never stopped anyone from going somewhere else. And, as long as we had a good relationship, and for everyone who's left, we've had good relationships. If that's an opportunity that makes sense, if it enhances our brand, if it enhances our product, if it's good for the fans and good for the company, of course we would be open to that. But, our people, our main people are our first responsibility. So.
Is there some good that comes out of all this? I mean, in the way Ring of Honor does business, any new opportunities or insights, lessons that could have been learned out of all this that in the long term help Ring of Honor?
Oh, I think if we're not learning from yesterday and understanding why that happened and how that happened, and not look to the future to see what we are doing that's really good, what we can do better, then we're not doing our jobs. I think right now, we're doing a fantastic job in engaging our fans and engaging new people to wrestling. Because one of the things that's so fantastic about Ring of Honor is our archive and it's been digitized. And, Al, there's not a lot of promotions that can speak to the fact that almost every other promotion's champion has had a run in Ring of Honor. Mm-hmm. And we can document that run, and we can show matches from their early days, and it's still relevant. And it's still relevant because the style of wrestling in Ring of Honor has really not changed. When we go back and look at some of those older archived matches, that intensity, that integrity, that athleticism, it is still there, and it still exists today. So while we may not be getting the current storyline of who's going to be the next champion, we are still presenting an incredible amount of wrestling content that I think is unsurpassed. So I think we've done a good job in creating moments and taking advantage of what we have and what we can offer. And I'm really proud of the work creatively we've done. The television shows featuring the individual stars have just been terrific. And I've gotten many, many comments out from people who really were not wrestling Ring of Honor fans, but liked wrestling in the past. And they really liked seeing the matches and the stories from the vantage points that we were telling. And that would not have happened if it hadn't been for this situation. So maybe there's a different way to tell the story, and maybe there's a different way to present your television. I think we're learning that right now.
Yeah, I mean, one of the kind of side stories that's come out of this, and I think Triple H kind of addressed it in one of these media calls, is if at the end of this, pro wrestling becomes less of a live event business and more of kind of a traditional television product. I mean, I guess the question is, can wrestling survive without a live audience, or at least with a live audience playing a different role? And it may need to, because, there's some thought that the last thing to kind of come back online is going to be the mass gatherings of several thousand people. Now, Ring of Honor was not doing, by and large, the 20,000 seat arenas or anything like that. So I don't know if it affects you maybe less than others. But have you thought of that even when things get somewhat back to normal and you feel good about sending people back to work, that it may not be in front of the crowds that even Ring of Honor was used to?
I think I don't even think I think it's going to be that. You have to be able to pivot, and fortunately, because of the way we are structured and the way we are built in our model, it's very easy for us to maneuver very quickly, because there's been no reliance on the large crowds. I mean, we've attracted them because we've earned that. When people who come to see Ring of Honor to see wrestling, and we've earned their respect. And I would love to have them back, but we're going to figure out a new way to get them engaged and to get them inside of the product. I think it's going to be a while for all of us to get back into the crowds, and I think Triple H is to give him his due on that. Is I think, look, it's always been a TV product. It's always been a TV product. Now, wrestling has existed. It's almost one of the first programs to ever be on television. Its roots go back to when television started broadcasting. And, obviously it was an infomercial for the live events and for the touring company. But we'll figure this out. I mean, we'll figure out the medium. Times like this and situations like this is where ingenuity and innovation and creativity shine. And those who can take advantage of that, and those who are open to that, will come out of this just fine.
And one thing I thought you mentioned, champions in other promotions having that Ring of Honor pedigree, and I thought that watching WrestleMania, where there were a couple of matches with just Ring of Honor alumnus, you had Daniel Bryan and Sami Zayn. That's a match we could have seen in Ring of Honor, 10, 11 years ago, and then Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins in what I thought was the best match of WrestleMania. Two other, very much Ring of Honor guys, former champions there. And one kind of theory I had is that working in Ring of Honor, better prepared, and those are two of the better matches on the entire weekend of WrestleMania, better prepared, I thought, them for those unique circumstances, because the Ring of Honor wrestling style as it is, and I think other promotions have adopted over the years, but it was less about, be sure you look at the hard camera and the production side, and more about the artistry, and that artistry can happen in front of a venue with a few dozen fans, 100 fans. And that is to say that modern independent wrestlers are used to playing.
Because it's good wrestling. I mean, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good wrestling, and that's what we're talking about. That's why you enjoyed it so much, is because we always talk about the integrity of the sport and the artistry that's involved, and the commitment to excellence and the relentless pursuit of pleasing the fan and working well with your partner. Those are Ring of Honor tenets. I mean, that's in our DNA. And just because you're in another promotion doesn't mean it leaves your system. It just means you adapt to the system that you're in. And you know what? Those matches were really good because they had to be fought by telling the story and by doing what they do. There was no masking anything. So I'm flattered by that comment, and I feel the same way whenever I see Ring of Honor talent in any of the other promotions. What their roots are. They know what their roots are, and you can never forget your roots. Sometimes you move past them, but the foundation is always there. It makes me proud.
Did you see that Table for Three a special on the WWE Network that was Ring of Honor graduates? I know Cesaro was there, Seth Rollins. I forget who the third was. But it was basically just the subject matter, how working for Ring of Honor kind of prepared them for the biggest stage of all. I don't know if you saw that, and if you did, do you have any thoughts on it?
I didn't see it, but I'm flattered, and again, I'm glad to hear that they remember their roots, because without that, you're kind of lost. I think that they respect the promotions that they're in, and there's no question that it's a grander stage and it's a larger stage, but. If you look at who's wrestling for Ring of Honor right now, they have that same pedigree, and I'm proud of that. So, that's flattering.
Let's talk about kind of the bigger picture of Ring of Honor before the world was turned upside down a year ago. I think around then as last we talked, and you were gearing up for the biggest show in Ring of Honor's history, Madison Square Garden. You guys were riding about as high as you ever did. And then by the end of 2019 into 2020, the narrative was very much different. It was about Ring of Honor really struggling to kind of find its place with AEW coming on the scene and this whole war between AEW and WWE and NXT. And the idea is that Ring of Honor kind of got lost in the shuffle there. Putting aside the challenges, again, of the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic, what it was or what is the state of honor or the state of Ring of Honor, in 2020?
I think it's fine. I mean, our talent roster is solid. We have amazing wrestlers. We have Marty Scurll is now heavily involved in our creative, and a bigger name is there than Marty, and he's a name that every promotion probably would have liked. He chose to stay with Ring of Honor. What does that say? The Briscoes chose to stay with Ring of Honor. We those comments about, we lost our way and all that stuff, we just didn't play in that game. I mean, we don't play in that. Well, that's not how we operate. We operate as a content for a broadcasting company that has a larger base of viewing, but we're not reliant on the same things. And I get it. I'm not. And I've said this to you, Al. I know because we've had this conversation. I'm not in the business to compete with WWE. It's not anything we ever thought we would do. I like being in their space, and I like being able to better the product. But as far as trying to be the WWE or trying to be at that level, it's not what we signed up for when we bought the company. So I think our best move at that time was really just to do our thing and provide value and engagement to our viewers and to our customers. I mean, streaming every live show to be able to get as many. I mean, that's one of the things I think that this has taken away is the ability for our Honor Club to see every show. There's no shows to be seen. So, I'm glad we were able to upgrade our digital library because we are going to come back and there are going to be shows, whether they are in front of people or not. The live streaming will still go on. So people are going to get their Ring of Honor. But I just think that because it wasn't a main stage play, it looked like we were in some kind of fallback position. I don't think that was the case. It's just that we were not part of the hype that was going on, and maybe deservedly so. But we have been maintaining and doing our job. And yeah, I'm sad. I'm sad that COVID took us out because I think what we had planned for the summer, what we had planned going into the fall, I think would have been very, very exciting. But plans change and things happen.
Was there any resentment on your part watching NXT reach the heights that it did, or AEW reach the heights that it has, and feeling, as some fans have observed, that what they're basically doing is co-opting a wrestling style that Ring of Honor brought to prominence, at least in front of American audiences, making it their own, and again, kind of leaving you on the sidelines. As we were just talking about, whether it's Seth Rollins or Kevin Owens or the multitude of wrestlers, both in WWE and AEW, that have risen to prominence, coming out of that Ring of Honor background and using that style, any part of view that's sort of like, hey, that's what we do. You're stealing that from us.
No, I don't have any. Listen, when I joined the company, and now we're in our 11th year as ownership of Ring of Honor, 10th or 11th year, depending on how you look at it from either a fiscal calendar or a real calendar. People have been leaving us from the day we got here and going to these other places. And, I think our talent is still the most coveted talent out there. And it's because our guys know how to do their jobs. And, it's our job as a company to keep them happy and keep them here so they don't go to those places. But, we're doing exactly what we should be doing. And I don't pay attention to the other stuff. I have a company to run. I have a responsibility to the company, for the company. And I can't be distracted by what other people are doing or what other people are saying because, in this business, there's more of that than anything else. I made the decisions, we'll circle back, not to end the interview, but I just want to circle back. The decisions that we made about the safety and welfare and well-being of our wrestlers, of our staff, of our production crew, of all the people that are part of the Ring of Honor community, and that includes the fans and the people who reach out to us, I think that tells you who Ring of Honor really is. And we've not changed. We've always been that company, and we will always be that company.
So some folks, though, did see what they thought was a change in the Ring of Honor product over the last several months. I think the most obvious example that the folks pointed to was CPO's run as a champion. And I think back to the final battle match where he won that title, and you've got, the car batteries and props and a lot of kind of the sports entertainment stuff that I think fans are not used to getting Ring of Honor that they might expect from Vince McMahon over in WWE. To a lesser extent, the involvement of Bully Ray in a lot of angles. There was a thought among some that Ring of Honor was moving away kind of from what brought it to the dance, maybe because of the thought that style had been co-opted by NXT and AEW, and you needed to come up with something else. And there was a move away from the kind of pure athleticism, more toward the sports entertainment side. Anything to that? Are fans making too much of it? Was there a conscious decision?
Oh, definitely.
To evolve the style?
Yeah. Yeah, let me just answer that, because I'm just listening to the question, and I'm really fascinated by it. If you think about the two personalities and stars that you named, you know, it really goes back to the essence of Ring of Honor, which is allowing the talent to be part of the story and to be part of their own creative, and our open-mindedness to that. I mean, you've never, you know, the reason why you saw Batteries and PCO, I mean, look at his character. And by the way, he was a fantastic champion for us. Fantastic. He is a gentleman, and he's an unbelievably great performer, gifted athlete. And that's his character. And that character of his kind of demanded that kind of storyline, because that's what people wanted to see from PCO. So I don't think we veered in any other direction than the true essence of what we do on a regular basis, which is we listen to the talent and how they feel they can be best utilized. And Bully the same way. I mean, look, you know, there's nobody in the business that could draw heat like that man. And that was his role. Well, I mean, I couldn't see him in any other role. So, I mean, so I don't think we were pandering or leaving our roots. Our roots have always been in the style of the wrestler. Let's go back to Kevin Owens when he was Kevin Steen, when he wrestled in Ring of Honor. He wasn't at WWE at that point. There were plenty of matches that were ladder matches and I quit matches and stuff like that. I think it has to do with who the wrestler is and what's the best way to portray him in his story to elevate his personality to its highest point. And by the way, I really didn't hear anyone complaining about that match. They thought that match was fantastic. Was it a little over the top? Well, it was PCO. PCO is over the top. So what do we want to have him do? In a clean, you know, a scientific wrestling? It doesn't make sense. So right. If people want to look to that and say, oh, they're selling out, well, you know, at least they're watching. And that's really what I care about. And if they said they sold out, but it was a really great match, well, I'm satisfied with that. Because why hasn't NXT sold out to Ring of Honor? Well, why don't we hear that? Or whatever. And I don't think we should ever hear that kind of thing, because I think you have to fit the style of who the wrestler is inside of the style of what you want to present. So I'm actually flattered again by comments like that, because that means we did our job right.
Does Ring of Honor come out of this whole COVID-19 pandemic stronger than it went into it? I mean, how are you feeling about, again, when we're on the other side of this, how Ring of Honor does? Does it find, do fans better appreciate the product that you've offered? Maybe an absence, you know, makes the heart grow fonder kind of thing?
Maybe. I mean, we're managing what we can manage. We're controlling what we can control. We're utilizing the assets and the resources that we have to keep the relevancy up. How do we come out of this? I think we actually come out of it very fine. You know, there's been no drastic changes to what we do or not do, other than having matches in front of people. You know, we've always been a digitally versed company. We've always used our library and our archives. I expect us to come out of this fine, but I don't know that it'll be the same, Al. That's the big question. Will it ever be the same? And if it's not the same, what is it going to be? And I think that's being defined right now, because I don't think we know the answer. I don't think Major League Baseball knows the answer. I don't know if the NBA knows the answer. Well, I'm not even sure my fellow brethren know the answer. I just don't think it's going to be what it was, at least not for a while. And maybe never again.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I know there are folks who are just thinking, oh, we got to get to the summer, and we're back in, where we were in February, and that's very much up in the air. I hear people speculating whether WrestleMania next year will have to happen in front of an empty arena again. So we're very far from being out of the woods just yet. Does Ring of Honor kind of pick up where it left off? I mean, is the main event of your next show Mark Haskins getting the title shot, and you really kind of pick up all the storylines where you were forced to drop them?
That's a creative call. Al, that's not a Joe Koff call. Joe Koff will understand what they're doing and understand the vision of that, but I wouldn't make that call. And I don't know how it can be. I mean, life has gone on pause, but it really hasn't. I mean, things are happening. And, Mark Haskins, and a great performer, I'd love to see him get that title shot. He certainly earned it. He's got to be able to get back into this country. And I say that just from yeah. I mean, so I don't know that it goes immediately back to what it was. I don't think anyone's going back to what it was, because life is changing, and we're seeing a whole different way of doing our business. And I think the promotions that have good backing and have good solid foundations will be fine. And then, the independent guys that will just wait for the opportunity to wrestle again, and they'll go back into their small venues with, low barrier of entry. There's plenty of guys starting to work. So there'll always be talent, and there'll always be professional wrestling. It just may not be what it was. Look, I was watching auto racing this weekend with Jeff Gordon, almost like playing a game. Mm-hmm. So they're making that change. Obviously, they'd like to get back into the in the cockpit and do real driving, but there's interest in that, and that's that esports kind of influence. So I think we're learning, and as long as we continue to learn and better ourselves and better our products, I think everybody wins.
Pro wrestling, though, it really is a uniquely a challenging form of sports or entertainment to get back to, right? Because you've got two half-naked competitors rubbing on each other in a ring, sometimes bleeding. It's in terms of the risk, I imagine it's as high as any for transmission from one competitor to another.
Yeah, it's my main concern. That's why I said I think it's important to understand what my talent, how they feel about that when they'll be ready.
Yeah, I mean,
and who'll be ready.
Baseball, football, golf, car racing.
I mean, golf and tennis are probably the safest sports to resume, because you don't have to be next to each other in the golf. You can be 6 feet apart. If you play golf, that you're very rarely, except at the tee or in a cart, in the same place. I mean, tennis, other than wiping the balls after every point, I mean, unless it's doubles, I guess. But even that, if you think about a doubles match, you're very rarely side by side. You're rarely that close. But there are sports that I think can get back into that. I think when you're in this bodily contact like we are, and football is, and sports like that, I think there has to be a little bit more caution thrown to the wind, and a little bit more knowledge on how to think about it when we do resume. Because to me, again, I'm going to go back and say welfare and safety far more important than the 6-minute match at this point.
Yeah. Ideally, would you like to, and I don't know, there's going to be logistics here about the availability of something like this, but would you like to have your performers tested before they go out there? If you could snap your fingers and have an infrastructure in place before you put on your first show, what might it involve?
I don't know. I think we have to look at the guidelines. I would like to see what's recommended for resuming activity like ours. Whether it's, I think temperature checks at the beginning, masks, and gloves, certainly not, unless you're Bandito or, Florida, Flamita. Unless you're already wearing masks, I think that's going to be a little bit, tricky. And I don't think anybody really wants to see professional wrestlers in hazmat suits wrestling unless it's a character, or even, the gloves. I think once requirements, I'm trying to think of the right word, whatever they put out, the recommendations and the guidelines, allow that kind of contact. And I mean, look, if two guys check out that they don't carry the virus, or they had it, or they didn't know they had it, and they're asymptomatic and not likely to spread it to someone else, those would probably be two people you would want in the ring. But then you have to figure on the referee. Where has he been?
That's really interesting.
So there's a lot of check.
Yeah. I asked you about,
there's a lot.
Whether you go back to the old matchmaking, and I imagine, as you touched on, some of the matchmaking may depend on factors like these. I mean, even aside from creative, is who's available, who's healthy, who can we pair that we have confidence in, that aren't infected and won't transmit it to each other. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and then you also have all the people that you have working for you that are are camera guys on side of the ring. I mean, maybe we're going to start seeing more. I don't want to scare my guys because they're not afraid of anything, but maybe there'll be a more robotic camera kind of shooting.
Yeah.
But again, until the social distancing is such that you can really manage an event effectively, maybe going back to something Triple H said, that maybe it becomes a television product. If they think about WrestleMania and the way they produced it and what they produced, and obviously the success that it had, but I think there was a viewer appetite for it because it was still kind of new and live, and there was a story to be told. You really have to reassess how you do your shows, because those matches, as you said, were good. I think they would have been good if they were live in the event, but because of the talent. But look at the opportunity they had to shape it, to make it look better, to tell a better story. And at the end of the day, is that going to have its effect? I think we have to learn that. That's part of that learning.
Yeah.
So,
what have you thought about the lack of how the lack of an audience affects the show? I mean, to me as a fan, that's been the most difficult thing when there is a high spot in a match, or even a promo. I was watching Raw on Monday, and you had this contract signing with Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins, and there were these lines that were clearly written, with the idea of the crowd will pop here. McIntyre says something, and this is where the crowd would go, ooh, and you get nothing. And it really hurts the TV product. So is there any way around that? I mean, I wonder if it was 30, I think if it was 30 years ago, promoters were just piped in crowd sounds. It would have just been that simple. You just play a track. Is there any way around that?
I don't know. 30 years ago, you could get away with it. I'm going to use another example of a show I watch. I watch Real Time with Bill Maher on Friday nights. And, he's going from his backyard, and sometimes at the beginning they insert audience shots and they put the laugh track on. I just don't think people would buy it. I don't know, unless there's an algorithm for it or AI is involved to make sure that you can almost emulate the perfect scenario situation where the crowd would react the way you would want them to react, organically and naturally, which is, of course, why Ring of Honor is so special, because when expectations are met, there's that organic eruption of chanting. It's not pre-produced. It's not produced. So until and technology will get us there. I mean, who would have ever thought anyone would be talking about AI in a podcast about wrestling?
Right. Yeah.
It's going to. No, really, think about it, Al. I mean, this is just the tenor of what we've been talking about is so different than what our normal would be, because we would be talking about this upcoming tour or this upcoming match, and what do I think of this? And now we're talking about how do we get or create a wrestling show that simulates maybe what was in the past. And I'm not sure that that's the way to look at it. I think if we keep looking at the past, we're going to get stuck because we don't have those same things available to us that we had in the past.
Yeah.
So it's got to be real. It's got to be genuine. I mean, it just can't be like, because I think fans will tolerate that less than not having any of the other, because at least you're watching two guys without being forced to have a laugh track. I used to hate comedies that had laugh tracks.
Sure, it was all the difference.
Yeah, nobody laughed like that. You know, it was like hit a button and you get these laughs. So I think we're learning. And again, I think technology will play a part in this. So
I've wondered if in the long term, at least part of the solution is to tap into the real reactions of fans watching from home. And I think WWE even put out some surveys to fans asking what would they think if on the TV screen there were some like inset boxes of some fans watching from home, and then it almost kind of like a simulated crowd, but at least you have a real reaction from them. I wonder if in the long term that's part of it, because it's interesting. One thing that's been interesting in the difference between AEW's product and WWE's product is that AEW, on occasion at least, has let some of the roster members sit in the audience, spread out, and you're talking, I don't even know if it's a half dozen or 10 or 12, but even that little bit of reaction, somebody to go, oh, when there's a big spot or something like that, even if it's a solitary person, makes a difference. It makes a big difference versus something happening in complete silence. So I've wondered if there's a way to tap into that somehow.
You know, talking about what you were saying, that WWE was testing or thinking about that. You know, we've been talking about that since this whole started. Is there a way, the Zoom technology and having that accessibility where people can watch it live? We've already been in discussions about that. I watched the draft. I mean, the draft is a good example of how to use that technology. Now, it's a different thing because all you have is a bunch of hometown boys screaming for their draft choice. So instead of being in a bar, you have 12 sets with the same people. Didn't quite capture that, but it was terrible. But it was fun the first time, and it was still kind of interesting the second time. But in the 170th pick, it's just we've got to continually push that envelope, I think. Yeah. But it was good on their attempt, and it shows that you can do that. You can have a virtual audience to a live event in 15 different places. I thought that technology was fantastic. Yeah. And that's why technology is going to be the key here.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, Joe, thank you so much for talking. Honestly, a lot of admiration and praise for the way you've been running things over there. I do think there are a lot of people who are for whom it's nice to see promoters think about their employees and their staff and their welfare first and foremost. So good on you, and best of luck. Hopefully, I'll be able to return to a Ring of Honor show somehow, some way in the near future, even if it's virtual.
I hope so too, Al, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. Believe me. So thanks.
All right. Okay, Joe. Have a good one. Appreciate it.